The science fiction genre is as big as it ever was, with Dune now out in the theaters. People are seeing a striking resemblance to Star Wars. But did Star Wars rip off Dune? Where did Frank Herbert get his inspiration for Dune? Is there deeper meaning or even occult symbolism hidden in Dune? Well, let's explore all this and more here on my Ben Solo Show. Welcome, I'm your host Ben. With all the remakes going on, everyone has been asking, when are you going to remake Dune? Dune has definitely tried. There was the David Lynch's version in the 80s, but this is, Lynch's version, and most fans of the book didn't like it from the start, and it was also a box office bomb. We also have the mini-series called Frank Herbert's Dune, which came out in the year 2000. It was as close as to Herbert's book to date, but because it was made for TV, the budget wasn't as high as a movie. Hence, the special effects are not as good as they could have been. In 2014, Paramount was going to remake the movie, but it was canceled before it went into production due to a copyright lapse. But making Dune as big as Star Wars would be intimidating for any director, not to mention for the production company. So when we all watch Star Wars, no matter what age or year we saw it, most of us realized this was more than a movie. It changed our entire Western culture. Every movie thereafter wants to be the next Star Wars, and there are a few movies that actually reach that level. We have Indiana Jones, for instance, Back to the Future, Jurassic Park. Then we have The Matrix, which completely blew the prequels of Star Wars out of the galaxy. And I don't mean the original three, we're the prequels here. Harry Potter seemed to put a spell on the world in 2001, and that same year, The Fellowship of the Ring came out, starting the Lord of the Rings series. Avatar was then released, in which we were already supposed to have Avatar 2, 3, 4, 5, and probably 10 by now, but who knows what James Cameron is really doing. Probably 7 miles underwater exploring whatever he's exploring, or every mystery on Earth instead of making his Avatar movies. Of course, we have all the Marvel and DC movies throughout the years, such as Spider-Man, X-Men, Batman, Avengers, and every other man you can think of, along with the new Star Wars series that came out, which were almost as big of a disappointment as the prequels. Although I did kind of like The Last Jedi, but it could have been way better. But now here we are, finally, with the Dune movie worth talking about. Which is ironic because without Dune, there would be no Star Wars, and probably without Lord of the Rings, there wouldn't be a Dune, since the book came first. And without all of these, we probably wouldn't have Harry Potter. But there are many similarities between Star Wars and Dune. Most diehard fans of the book are upset that George Lucas never seems to give Frank Herbert any credit, since it seems he borrowed many concepts from Dune. In fact, AP ran a headline in 1977 titled, "Is Star Wars a Dune Ripoff?" But after reading the article, it is more about what gave Herbert his inspiration for Dune rather than Lucas ripping off Herbert. Now, in a lot of ways they are similar, but could it be the fact that both Lucas and Herbert grew up in the same era along with their dislike for big government and big corporations? Could it be that both just had similar interests? Well, let's find out. Here are a few similarities between Star Wars and Dune. They both take place on a desert planet, with Star Wars taking place on Tatooine and Dune taking place on Arrakis. This is an essential plot development for both of these movies or books. For Dune, Arrakis is the main planet where the book takes place and where the drug spice is found. Paul Atreides finds his destiny, and of course, Luke also finds his calling after meeting Obi-Wan on Tatooine. They also have natives that wear cloaks and even water evaporator systems. In fact, that is where Luke grows up, on a moisture farm, and in Dune they have a device called dew collectors. There are a few other things related to the desert. They both have sand crawlers. In Dune, they are the vehicles to mine the drug spice. In Star Wars, they are the vehicles that the Jawas ride in. But this is just the beginning. Let's go even further. You could say that both Dune and Star Wars stole the idea of having a father figure mentor from many different stories throughout history. These mentors prepare and train the main character for what will be their destiny. In Dune, we have Gurney Halleck, played by Josh Brolin in the new movie. Believe it or not, in David Lynch's version in 1984, it was played by Patrick Stewart. In Star Wars, we of course have Obi-Wan Kenobi, who trains Luke as a Jedi and in the ways of the Force. But really, this is an old concept going as far back as Merlin and King Arthur. So it is hard to say that Lucas stole this idea from Herbert. However, both of these masters teach their pupils in sword fighting. But with Star Wars, it is with a lightsaber, which is way cooler, I have to admit. But in Dune, they do have a force shield around them, which is also cool. In Star Wars, you have the Galactic Empire, also known as the Evil Empire, headed by Emperor Palpatine. In Dune, you have the Imperium, which is headed by Shaddam IV, who has the title of Padishah Emperor. Both systems are a totalitarian government, and both Herbert and Lucas got inspiration after seeing democracies being turned into dictatorships, and they both got inspiration from President Richard Nixon. Herbert wrote in Chapter House Dune, quote, "All governments suffer a reoccurring problem. Power attracts pathological personalities. It is not that power corrupts, but that it is magnetic to the corruptible. Such people have a tendency to become drunk on violence, a condition to which they are quickly addicted." Herbert was also very outspoken against the Soviet Union and was a distant relative of the Republican Senator Joseph McCarthy. However, Herbert said he didn't agree with the methods that McCarthy used. Now, Herbert was a speechwriter for senators before writing science fiction, which began to give him an inspiration for Dune. But really, talking about totalitarian dictatorships isn't new. Lucas said that Nixon's presidency, quote, "got me thinking historically about how do democracies get turned into dictatorships? Because the democracies aren't overthrown, they're given away." Now, Lucas also said, quote, "The whole point of the movies, the underlining element that makes the movies work is that you, whether you go backwards or forwards, you start out in a democracy and democracy turns into a dictatorship, and then the rebels make it back into a democracy," end quote. So from the political perspective, we can see that both Lucas and Herbert were not happy by the way things were progressing in government. So using fiction, they both told a story of what happens when people possess too much power. Did you know that the full name of the Jedi is Jedi BENDU, spelled B-E-N-D-U? In the original draft, Lucas called the galaxy's guardians of peace the Jedi BENDU. However, he decided to drop the BENDU part in the movies and just refer to them as Jedi. In the animated Rebels series, however, BENDU is a Force-sensitive character in the show. So in Sanskrit, which is an ancient Indian language, BENDU, spelled with an I instead of an E, is often translated as dot or point, which could also relate to why some Hindus paint a dot on their forehead. It is also known as the point of universal consciousness from which the universe originates. So in Dune, similar to the Jedi Order, you have the Bene Gesserit Order. They use the term Prana BENDU. Again, in Sanskrit, prana is the universal life force that flows through the universe and around the body. So Herbert wrote in Dune that prana BENDU is the supreme control of nerves and muscles. Paul Atreides was trained in this manner of controlling his body after he was forced to put his hand inside a box, testing his willpower. Along with his willpower, he was forced to control his pain. If he let go, he was going to die. He was able to overcome it. Now, conversely, Luke Skywalker is also trained in a similar fashion of controlling his emotions and feelings in Empire Strikes Back when he is training with Yoda. So you could say that George Lucas took this idea from Dune, or is it possible that both Lucas and Herbert were studying different aspects of Eastern religions and philosophies, since this is a theme found throughout many belief systems? But this leads us into the coolest aspect of Star Wars, and something that wouldn't make the Star Wars universe what it is today without the use of the Jedi power, the Force. The Force adds an entire deeper meaning and dimension to Star Wars. It's something that we are all inspired by the first time we see Star Wars. For example, when Obi-Wan uses the Jedi mind trick, we were all practicing it on each other. Now, whether or not it worked is a completely different story, but in Dune, they have a power known as the Voice, which works in a very similar fashion to the Jedi mind trick. It is described as the manipulation of speech to achieve complete control over a receiver. The Bene Gesserit order perfected this practice, and Paul is trained in this type of supernormal ability. It is only really to use in dire situations and not to get your younger siblings to punch themselves in the face, something I'm sure everyone tried to do. But in the original Star Wars, Lucas explains through Obi-Wan that the Force
is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
Now, in the prequels, Lucas explains that the Force is created by something called midichlorians, whatever the heck it is, which are microscopic intelligent life forms that originated from the foundation of life in the center of the galaxy and ultimately resided within the cells of all living organisms. Now, most of us didn't like this understanding, but I think it was more because of how bad The Phantom Menace was. I mean, when it came out in 1999, I actually skipped school to go see it because I was so excited, and then I fell asleep halfway through. I woke up halfway through in the battle of Obi-Wan fighting Darth Maul or whatever it was, and I didn't even care what happened and decided I wanted to go back and fall asleep, and so I did. So I didn't even see the ending. I didn't watch the full movie until years later, and it's still bad. But getting back to our story here, and enough on the biggest disappointment in movie making history ever. I mean, if there was an award for the biggest movie letdown ever, Phantom Menace should come in first place. But let's get back to talking about Dune. Of course, in Dune, the drug melange, also known as just spice, but technically spice is what is used to make melange, enhances certain abilities in the body. It can provide a longer lifespan, greater vitality, and heightened awareness. It can also unlock psychic abilities in some humans. Also in Dune, the Bene Gesserit order follows the Bene Gesserit way, which involves, quote, maintaining balance, like the idea of yin and yang, and control over oneself and, by extension, one's environment. Again, both of these are a very similar concept, which have roots in ancient Eastern thought. And even the Matrix has elements of this as well, since this is exactly what Neo is being trained to do, and also can make things move with his mind. But one of the first science fiction books to express this is Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. Heinlein, who wrote his book in 1961. This was way before its time, and we have yet to see a blockbuster movie. Herbert said he drew a lot of inspiration from Heinlein, and it seems so did Lucas. So you can really say without Stranger in a Strange Land, we wouldn't have Star Wars or Dune. Valentine Michael Smith, the main protagonist in Stranger in a Strange Land, is also able to control his mind and has powerful psychic abilities. So in the argument over if Lucas ripped off Herbert, you can say that they both got inspired over Heinlein. And of course, none of these books would have been written without Edgar Rice Burroughs' book, A Princess of Mars, back in 1912, which started the John Carter of Mars series. Of course, Disney made this into a movie in 2012, which was a box office bomb. But it was really only because all of the elements that made the book great were borrowed by every other sci-fi book thereafter. So when the movie came out, it wasn't anything groundbreaking. And needless to say that Star Wars wouldn't be what it is today without the shows of Buck Rogers, Lost in Space, and the one and only Star Trek series. Maybe now after Dune's success, someone will finally make a Stranger in a Strangeland movie. So let's see what happens. When we think of movies that change society, most of them begin with the hero's journey. How a regular person who doesn't seem special in his own right is destined to lead his people, a nation, a world, or even an entire galaxy. When Star Wars came out, it was a gamble. Nothing was ever like it, and no one believed that the story would work. Lucas knew that. So he took a timeless classic tale and brought it to life in a world far, far away. This was the genius of Star Wars. When you break it down, it is really about a poor boy who meets a wizard and learns he is destined to save the world after he is given a sword and gains supernormal abilities. Then he goes to the castle to save the princess, returns to the castle with his cavalry to battle the evil ruler, and then blows up the castle in the end and saves the day. Then you have the swashbuckling pirate turned hero after realizing it is better to fight for the good guys than the bad guys. This is why Star Wars worked. Lucas knew no one would be able to connect with distant planets, alien beings, and an evil empire from a long, long time ago. So he created the characters in such a way that made us all love them and be able to connect with them. Herbert does the same with Dune, but in an even more complex way. Herbert wrote out in detail every aspect to every character in his book. He basically wrote a book for every character he had. This is why translating the book to film has been so challenging. It is so complex and deep that it gets lost when portraying on the big screen. This is what the recent movie was able to pull off because it wasn't trying to cram a 500-page book in 2.5 hours. It knew what it wanted to be, which will be at least 2 or maybe 3-part movie series. But similar to Luke, Paul goes through the hero's journey where he wakes up as an enlightened person and is able to see the visions of his paths in life and where it leads. He is the Messiah for the freemen people, similar to how Moses is for the Jewish people. Luke is never really looked at as a Messiah per se, but if you really look at the 9 Star Wars movies, it is Anakin who is the real chosen one as the Messiah. But he chose a dark path. In the later Dune book, The God Emperor of Dune, which came out in 1981, follows a similar path which has Paul's second son, Leo Atreides II, becoming a tyrant as he turns into a slug-like creature after merging with the sandworms. Of course, Anakin's journey mirrors this, who turns bad and also changes his image to that of Darth Vader. Now, granted, Darth Vader or Anakin becomes good in the end, but with Leto, it's a little bit of a different story. However, the idea of the slug-like human creature is nearly the same as that of Jabba the Hutt. Some really believe that Lucas stole this directly from Herbert. When you look up drawings of Leto as the slug, it looks very similar to Jabba. Now, after researching this whole topic of Herbert and Lucas and everything else, I thought there was some very interesting occult things that came up. I'm going to go kind of deep here with some of the ideology that seems to be related to Dune. You have the Bene Gesserit order, which kind of sounds a lot like the Jesuit order. And if you don't know what the Jesuit order is, that's a whole conspiracy in itself. They definitely exist 100%, and when you combine all the aspects of like the Illuminati, they seem to be kind of like now almost like a hitman for the Illuminati, which again, this kind of goes into the conspiracy realm, but it's kind of interesting that there's a lot of connections here. They also believe that they have certain abilities and powers. The other aspect that Herbert gets into is the idea of bloodlines. This is depicted pretty well because Paul's parents were specifically chosen to have a certain type of child, hence a kind of bloodline. The occult, the elite, whatever you want to say, the global syndicate that supposedly controls things in the world, they also believe in bloodlines. There's supposedly 13 of these bloodlines, and they will not mix their blood with any other kind of race or anything else. They have to be within these families, which is why they say there's a lot of incest going on. The idea is that they want to be the supreme humans that rule the earth, and they do not want to mix their bloodlines, so bloodlines are very important to them. We kind of see this with this idea of Dune as well. Now, did Herbert use this? I don't know. It's just some interesting things to point out. Getting back to the Jesuit order, which was created by Ignatius of Loyola and approved by the Pope Paul III in 1540. The conspiracy is that these are the beginnings of everything we know about the Illuminati. In fact, one of the things that Martin Luther, who created the Lutheran Church, did was get away from everything that was happening in the church, because at the time in the 1500s, he saw that it was all becoming corrupt and money became the focus point. Now, when we think of the Illuminati, a lot of times the word Freemason comes up. What's kind of ironic is in Herbert's book, the Freemen sounds kind of similar to the Freemasons, and in fact, many people believe that Freeman is a bloodline name in the Illuminati, but this is spelled with 2 E's as in free instead of 1 E. Now, all of this I'm saying, again, this is all kind of in the conspiracy realm, but I just wanted to bring this up because it is very interesting when you start looking at these. There are also people who believe that parts of the ideology in Dune is taken from Egyptian mythology. Now, again, I couldn't really find too many things to relate to this, but there's a few things here and there, but I don't really believe that they are worth mentioning here. So what do you guys think of all this? Is all this connected? Did George Lucas really steal from Herbert? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below and let's have a conversation about it. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. And what do you think about all the occult in Dune? Is it true? Is it just coincidence? I just thought I'd bring it up and see what you guys think. So definitely let me know. So don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I just created this new YouTube channel and also a Rumble channel. But go to Rise TV to find my Ben solo show as well as everything we're doing on Edge of Wonder. So with that, I'll leave you guys with this. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, I'll see you guys out in space.